Hello, Dark Reader, and welcome to the Dark Side of the Library podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and we're doing a little bit of a different format over on YouTube, so make sure to join us over there at Dark Side of the Library. And if there are any books that we do talk about throughout the week that you are interested in, make sure to check out our show notes at darksideofthelibrary.com. We've got a lot of stuff over there. I actually use it to kind of cultivate a bunch of books for me to read or catch up on, especially this month in particular. So today, anyway, we have a minisode, and we're going to be talking about Atlas 6, and this is by Olivie Blake. So first, I'm going to talk about Olivie Blake, and then we're going to talk about the summary of the book real quick and kind of my thoughts about this book. This book was published last year in 2021, and the second book in the series, so the sequel, Atlas Paradox, that was published, I think, October 25th of 2022, so really not that long ago. I'm going to quickly actually read that book so that everything's all fresh in my mind, and then, we'll see how it all goes. All right. A little bit about Olivie Blake. Sure, her actual name isn't Olivie Blake, actually. It's Alexine Farrell-Falmouth. Alexine Farrell-Falmouth, I think? I don't think I said that correctly. Her pen name is Olivie Blake. So her little bio in her website, which you can find in our show notes, is quite adorable. She's very clearly a writer. So here's what little bits about herself that she wrote in her about page. She's a lover, a writer of stories, and many of which involve fantastic, the paranormal, or the supernatural, of course, but it's not always the case. So some of the books that she's actually written about that maybe you'll recognize, she has a literary romance that's called Alone with You in the Ether, or Ether, and that was published in November. She was published in a graphic novel series, it looks like, called Clara and the Devil, and a couple other books as well. She had a debut YA novel called My Mechanical Romance. It's hilarious, and that was published in May 2022. So yeah, she's done a lot of writing in the past 2 years. So she actually lives in LA with her husband and what she says her goblin prince toddler, and she is generally tolerated by her pit bull rescue. So fun little blurbs about her. She's hilarious. Anyway, so here is our Atlas 6 summary. If you've never read the book, here we go. So I'm actually reading off of a script. You could probably tell that. All right. So the Alexandrian Society is a secret society of magical academicians. I can't say that word. I'm so sorry. So these are like the best of the best in the entire world, and they specialize in certain things, and that's just what they do. The members are actually caretakers of lost knowledge from the greatest civilizations of antiquity. Kind of cool. I like it. Those who earn a place among their number will secure a life of wealth, power, knowledge, etc., prestige beyond their wildest imaginations. Each decade, the world's 6 most uniquely talented magicians are selected for initiation, and we have our 6 here. So we have 2 who come from the same school, which statistically seems kind of unlikely, by the way, but I'm overlooking it. We have Libby Rhodes, and then we have Nicholas Ferrer de Verona. They're kind of like childhood enemies, a little bit. They're clearly doing like this little flirty thing throughout the book. But anyway, so they have very similar powers. They're in a very similar segment of the magical academia world. They're cosmologists, and they can control matter with their minds. That's cool. Next we have Reina Mori, and she's a naturalist who can speak the language of nature, of life, essentially itself. Parisa Kamali is a mind reader, and she's a seductress as well. Her powers are almost unmatched, except by Colum Nova, and he is a very rich, very beautiful man who can bring about the end of the world. He only need to ask. Tristan Kane is another interesting character. He is the son of a crime kingpin who can see the secrets of the universe. Really interesting concepts for magic. I really like it. So they are recruited by the mysterious, enigmatic Atlas Blakely and must spend 1 year together to qualify for this initiation. And 5 of them are told will actually make it. 1 is going to be eliminated. If they can prove themselves to be the best, they will survive. And that is just most of them. Most of them will survive. All right, so next we're going to be talking about my review. This book was a BookTok sensation. This is going to be a common thing I think we see a lot now. And so far I haven't been as impressed with the BookTok sensations, but this one was good. In fact, I didn't really pay attention to this book for, well, obviously until recently. I saw it around. It has an amazing cover on it. And, you know, when you go into a physical Amazon store, Barnes & Noble, wherever, you'll see this book all the time still. So I've always been curious about it, but I wasn't sure how dark it would be. I wasn't sure if it would qualify. So I finally picked it up, and you know what? I enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it. I was surprised with myself. So this novel is super smart, in my opinion. It definitely edges on adult fiction, so you would call it new adult fiction, not like, hey, it's newly released, but like entering into true adulthood, not YA, not quite adult, but like in that middle. You can feel that, but it doesn't feel like it has that lingering YA thing going on where you're just stuck on that romance part or just something really weird or jealousy. There's not all of those random hangups that YA novels tend to have. Oddly, this novel is a little sexy. It is LGBTQ plus friendly, and it is good. Like, it's actually well written out. Things actually make a lot of sense, which is perfect. It just feels very natural. So here's the kind of the layout of the story. The narrative is told by each character, their different perspectives on each chapter. Sometimes you'll get one chapter where you'll see one person's side of the story or the event, and then you'll see another person's side of the same event in the next chapter, or maybe a couple chapters after. Usually with those books, I'm kind of like, sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially with 6 perspectives, but it was really easy to keep everything in line. It was mostly chronological, and I felt like it was a pretty smooth read. So I know I already talked about each character in the summary, but I'm going to just talk about my feelings towards each character briefly. So we'll start with Libby. For some reason, she ends up on everybody's radar as being the worst. Not the worst as in a big bad, but just like she's not as good as everybody else, like not as talented. She's really insecure. And honestly, I could relate to her a lot. I wasn't really sure why everyone was kind of picking on her. I felt a little bad. There's a couple scenes with her and Tristan that were really cool as far as how they worked together with their magic. She's one of those people that's really insecure and she doesn't know how powerful she is. And that's actually what holds her back, is herself. I kind of like that aspect of her. We also have Nico, who's got the same kind of powers as she does. Different people, so it comes from a different lens, which is fun. Nico has a lot of... I really like Nico too, actually. He's a little more bubbly. He's not as serious or broody as all of the other male characters in the book. Not like it's a problem, but he seems really caring. He seems like he has a really big heart, even though he kind of picks on Libby a lot, especially in the beginning, but that dies down pretty fast. He has an interesting home life as well, and he has this really awesome friend named Gideon, who's like this mermaid. He's like a monster who travels through dreams. It's wildly cool. Next, we have Parisa. I liked her as well. Originally, I was like, oh, no, not her, because she's kind of snobby. She's like, oh, I'm so good at everything. But she grows on you. And I just like some of the scenes that we have with her. She definitely takes the spotlight a lot in this book. We also have a lot of spotlight shown on Tristan, who's our other character. It's weird. Tristan, okay, I liked all of the characters, don't get me wrong, but Tristan wasn't necessarily my favorite. I felt like he was very dense. He just didn't know what was happening. But he should be more brilliant. It was just interesting how he just seemed really dumbfounded all the time, or just didn't seem to critically think. It felt like he needed people to take charge of him. Next, we have Callum, who is kind of our immediate, nobody really likes him, but I actually did. A lot of people in Goodreads were criticizing the fact that Tristan and Callum were hard to distinguish. I actually thought they weren't. So to each their own as far as how they felt, but Callum definitely is an interesting character, and his relationship with Tristan is great. Raina is one of those characters that I felt like we didn't get a lot of information about. Originally, they built her up to be this really powerful person. One of the quotes in the book basically said, like, you don't want to mess with her. And that was just, you just don't do that. But we don't get a lot of Raina backstory or who Raina is, and she's not really a big player, it seems like, in Atlas 6 for some reason. And I really wish she was, because she seemed to have so much potential, and I really enjoyed her. She's kind of like your little goth girl. That's what I got out of it, and I really dug her. So I really wished we had a lot more with Raina. So I was enraptured by the characters. But here's the thing, maybe you've picked up on this already. The characters by themselves were not as fascinating as their interactions with each other. The interactions with each other are what make the book great. If you just had them by themselves, it didn't feel like we got enough space, or it wasn't long enough to develop a feeling towards the character as themselves. I hope that makes sense. So, but the interactions that they have with each other is really fascinating, and how their powers kind of play off of each other is also a really fascinating part of the book. Granted, not everybody like Raina. We don't get as much of that play as, for instance, like Tristan and Libby, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. Parisa also tends to have little pieces in how she plays and interacts with each character, how her powers influence others. So it's cool in that regard. So not only do we have those 6, but we have other characters too. We have Gideon for Nico. There's Atlas, obviously. We have Dalton, who's kind of like Atlas's step-in. He's like an assistant, I guess. And then we also have Ezra, who is Libby's boyfriend. There's all kinds of other characters that are at least largely featured in the novel. So even though we have at least 10 pretty prevalent characters, I never felt confused, which is really good. I noticed that a lot of the time, especially with like BookTok writers so far, it seems like if we add any more than 4 characters, things get jumbled together and I can't figure out who is who or why they're doing what, that kind of thing. So I said this already earlier, I wanted to get to know each character by themselves, just who they are. We get a pretty large history on most of the characters. There's a lot of depth there, but it still oddly wasn't enough to really make me feel like I knew who Parisa was or Tristan was. I knew who they were, or I could surmise how they would be like as they spoke with other people, but it's also hard because the whole point is that they all know that one person is going to be eliminated, and it's almost like they're trying to vote on who's not going to. So it doesn't really give you a genuine perspective of who that person might be. They might be trying to play a game, essentially. So the book was addictive. There were a few slower parts of the book, I'm not going to lie, but I definitely felt engaged almost the entire time of the book. The audiobook is really well done. We have a whole host of narrators for each character, including some of the other characters like Ezra and Gideon. They pop in every once in a while. It was really easy to tell each person apart. So lastly, I'm going to talk about some of the criticisms of this book, and these are ones that I definitely agree with. So as far as just a first novel situation, clearly we're going to have more novels. There already is one that came out, but it lays out the foundation for the future novel, but it doesn't seem to wrap anything up in this one. Honestly, it just kind of leaves you hanging. So if I had read this a year ago, I'd be kind of pissed. I'd be a little upset because it's like, I don't know why we went through all of this stuff, including just some of the in-depth explanations of the magic, and sometimes it could come off as pretentious. And that's another critique that I do agree with, is that, and I didn't mind this necessarily because I don't know, I got really enthralled with it, but I can see how it'd be like, okay, let's move on. I get that, here's all the physics surrounding, bending minds or whatever. So the pretentiousness I get, the foundation of the book without having any sort of wrap up is also problematic. And I do think some of the characters may come off as bland, but hopefully that gets resolved in the next book. So like I said in the very beginning, I'm going to be reading the Atlas Paradox book pretty soon, hopefully not next week for the minisode, but the week after. So if you're curious about the Atlas Paradox, make sure to stay tuned for our other minisode that will be released in probably like 2 weeks. These are longer books, so it's taking me a little longer to finish. Overall, I'm going to say I liked this book. So the Atlas 6, I would say, is about like a 4 out of 5 for me. It was really fun, and especially as a new adult novel, it was really lots of cool stuff with magic. It's an urban fantasy. I usually am not huge on that, or as like the academic witchy academia, but it was pretty fun and different. So check it out. This is by Olivie Blake. It's the Atlas 6, and we'll be talking about the Atlas Paradox in a few more weeks. If you're looking for other dark books, you can join us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, like you are here, or if you're on our podcast, also check out our podcast. You can also check us out on Amazon Live, which is on amazon.com/live/Dark Side of the Library. We'd love to see you over there. And we like to publish every Wednesday for Wednesday Addams and every Friday for Freaky Fridays. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to share this podcast or YouTube channel with your spooky friends, family, loved ones. Spread the word. It helps us out. And make sure to rate and review on your favorite listening app. Usually it'll be on Apple Podcasts, but it's really nice. You can also subscribe here over on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a creep-tastic week.